Welcome back. And of course, the happenings in Washington, D.C. the last couple of days, especially with the shooting there at the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., has left all of us brokenhearted and our brains on tilt. Very timely today to have back with us Kenneth Abramowitz. He is the author of the Multifront War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife. There's a picture of the cover on the screen there. He's the managing general partner and co-founder of NGN Capital. He has been a contributor to various organizations that are fighting to protect Israel and America from political Islam and the radical left. He's the founder of SaveTheWest.com, which is a website dedicated to saving Western civilization itself. And there is the picture of the landing page there, SaveTheWest.com. Ken, good to see you again. How are you?
Yeah, great to be with you.
Thank you for your time. How are you processing what happened in Washington, D.C. a couple of nights ago?
Well, it's a tragedy beyond compare, but you could say it's also was predictable. Because before you get physical terror, you get what I call cultural terror. You allow false narratives to filter around the world or in the country. You don't challenge it. When I say you, I mean it could be the government, it could be Jewish groups, Christian groups. Whoever should be challenging false narratives was not doing their job. The professors at the university that this person studied at were not being reprimanded or monitored properly. The head of the department wasn't being monitored. The administration running the university allowed incitement, basically, within the walls of the university. And after a few years of this, what I call cultural terrorism, it leads to physical terror because someone gets so angry at a false narrative that they've been fed that they feel they have to act out in a violent way. And that's where we got a few days ago.
Do we know anything more about Mr. Rodriguez and how he was radicalized?
Well, just reading articles on the internet, people say that he took some courses by viciously anti-America, anti-Semitic professors at the University of Chicago, and which is par for the course. You know, it's not like they're the only anti-America, anti-Semitic professors in the world, but basically our major universities have been taken over by our enemies. And our enemies, I color code the reds, the greens, and the blues. The reds being the color code for communists, the green for Islamists, and the blue for the United Nations representing globalists. So these three false narratives have infected our universities, and we didn't throw them out. We the people, we the government, we the parents. Everyone's culpable in this, but we as a society didn't do our job to take control over the false narratives, which came from our enemies. It's not like these were American false narratives. Basically, our enemies have bought our universities, and we allowed it to happen.
Why is anti-Semitism the one exception to CRT?
Anti-Semitism is a disease, and it's been a disease of 3,800 years. I have an expression, show me the first Semite, and I'll show you the first anti-Semite. So Judaism's been around for 3,800 years and with Abraham. And then about 500 years later, roughly 3,300 years ago, the Torah, the Old Testament, was delivered to the Jews and summarized in the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments is like the Cliff Notes of Judaism, and adopted by Christians. So the Cliff Notes of Judeo-Christian society and philosophy is the Ten Commandments. Well, the Ten Commandments are basically a rule book. And at that time, the world was run by criminals, by pagans who didn't believe in one God. They believed in multiple gods, and they had no uh, um, firm distinction between right and wrong. And so the Jews basically delivered a rule book. So can you imagine, pretend that you lived in biblical times and every city, state, and country was run by a criminal organization. And you walk into the mayor or the governor or the king's office and say, Mr. Leading Official of our state, I want to show you the rule book. And the king says, and who are you? I mean, I'm the king. I write the rules, and I'm God, by the way, too. God sent me to be the king. And you show up with the 10 Commandments and you tell me I'm supposed to read them and listen to them and abide by them? I don't think so. Get out of my office, or let me kill you, because I do not want your laws. And that's the beginning of anti Semitism.
Wow. Do you think, Ken, that all levels of law enforcement and military understand Islam?
Not close. Not close. Well, bear in mind, they barely understand. It's not just the greens, as I call them, it's also the reds and the blues. So these three groups of organizations and countries, the reds being particularly China, Russia, the greens being particularly Iran and Qatar, and the blues being particularly the UN, World Economic Forum, and drug cartels. These are all enemies of Judaism and, by the way, Christianity. Christians don't know that, by the way. Everybody focuses on anti-Semitism because the bad guys decided to go for the Jews first. Jews are like the appetizer. But the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues, all of whom are atheists, according to me, hate God, our Judeo-Christian God. They hate our Constitution and Bill of Rights. But America's 90% Christian. So the bad guy said, well, let's not go after the 90% right now as much as we want to kill them. Let's go after the 2% of the people who are Jews, because that's like a bite size. So let's go after the bite-sized Jews. And after we denigrate and destroy Judaism, then we'll go after Christianity. So I have an expression that the bad guys are after the Christians, the Jews just happen to be in the way.
So what do you think the motive is of President Trump giving an olive branch to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Syria?
Well, I'll tell you the good news and bad news. The good news, I'm pretending that I know what President Trump is thinking. And the good news is he wanted to have strong relations with Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, which we've had in the past 10 years under the leadership of Mohammed bin Salman. He wanted to have good relations with Qatar, which is more problematic because Qatar is a frenemy. Saudi Arabia used to be a frenemy, and under Mohammed bin Salman converted into an enemy. So they're no longer an Islamist country. By that I mean they're not trying to impose Islam on other countries like America. They're basically saying we're a Muslim country and you're a Christian country and have a good day. We're not trying to take over your culture and don't take over our culture. But Qatar, which is an Islamist country, is trying to take over America through Muslim culture. I call that cultural warfare. And they're infecting the universities. So Qatar's not on the same page as Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. So, but from President Trump's point of view, he wanted to bring their wealth into America, invest in America, and basically show Iran, Russia, and China, our primary enemies right now, that the world's moving forward without them. They're welcome to join us and grow their countries and grow their economies, and if they want, or they can be outside and just watch us do well while they move into poverty. So that was the message he wanted to send. So I think that's a good message. If he had asked me, I would have said wonderful, but you should say to Qatar, we want you to do the following 7 things. You can do it in private. You don't have to do it publicly. But here's 7 things we want you to do, and we expect you to do it, and let's discuss each of the 7. We don't want you sending money to our universities anymore. We don't want you funding social media and media against us. We want you to close your Al Jazeera false narrative propaganda television and social media sites. But I don't think he did that. But anyways, if he had asked me, that would be the one change that I would have added to the trip.
The Qatar thing was really interesting, and yet when I watched the Saudi Arabia thing, he obviously has a warm relationship with the young king there, and it looks like Saudi Arabia could come into the accord. But I'm wondering if we're being duped by Qatar.
I would say so, and I mean the obvious question: are we duping ourselves? But there's definitely some conflict of interest. President Trump and his family and friends have a lot of business with Qatar, and that might be clouding their opinion of and preventing them from being overly critical of Qatar for what Qatar has been doing. On the other hand, you could say, look, we're good friends with Qatar, and I'm giving you some friendly advice, pretending that I'm President Trump and his team. And I wish they gave more friendly advice to Qatar.
I guess there's a good side of this. It's better to deal with them than isolate yourself from them, so to speak.
Yes, again, pretending that I'm President Trump, I would say to you, you want me to take our frenemy Qatar and make them into an enemy? You want them to ship their billions and billions of dollars into Chinese investments or Iranian investments? You want them on the outside or you want them on the inside? That's my guess as to what President Trump would have said to me.
All right. Let me take a quick break. Check out Ken's book, The Multifront War, Defending America from Political Islam. And check out his website, SaveTheWest.com. Very, very resourceful. We'll be right back. Such an honor to have back with us today Kenneth Abramowitz. He's the author of a fascinating book called The Multifront War. You can check it out. There's a picture of the book, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife. That's a lot. He also heads up the website, SaveTheWest.com. And this is his passion. Check it out. A lot of resourceful information there, SaveTheWest.com. Mr. Abramowitz, I was thinking during the break, one of the headlines this morning is that Iran is thinking about moving some of their nuclear operation. Now, what's so interesting about this story is that the intelligence lets us know that they're thinking about moving it, which I would assume that came from Israel. Do you think a strike on the nuke operation in Iran is inevitable?
Yes, it's inevitable. When you're dealing with death cults, there's no non-military solution. It would be like pretending in 1939 if you said to me, is war with Germany inevitable? I would say yes. Is it inevitable with the Japanese Imperial Army? Yes. And then perhaps pretend. You say to me, isn't there some way we can negotiate and reason with these people? And as we know with history, countries can be taken over by death cults and false narratives. And you can't shake them out of that false narrative with words. You basically have to fight a war with them to end their false narrative. Okay. So it's a sad situation, but that's the way it is.
It appears to me that Israel's prepared to go at it alone. And that's not to say without the approval of the United States, but maybe without the United States leading the way. Is that accurate?
Well, I see reports like that in the internet and whatnot. That would be my guess. but let me explain for some reasons. Um, Iran is an existential risk to Israel, and it's an existential risk to America. Iran's promised to kill everyone in America and everyone in Israel. The difference is the Israelis believe that pledge by Iran, and Americans don't. You see, Americans are further away. So Americans say, well, it's not true. They're just joking. They're emotional. They don't really mean to kill all the Christians in America. Why would they want to kill all the Christians in America? And Americans don't understand that death cults don't need a reason to kill you. Uh, they just like killing. It's like interviewing an animal, okay, a lion, okay, a ferocious lion, and you say, Mr. Lion, why do you want to eat me? You want to eat me because I'm Jewish? Because I'm Christian? I'm Hindu? Pretending lions speak English, the lion says, I don't care what you are, I'm hungry, and you look like lunch, and I have to have lunch, and they won't let me in McDonald's, so I'm going to eat you. So the Iran is a death cult, and there's no way to dissuade them out of that animal-like behavior other than through military means. And because Israelis know that and Americans don't, basically America's saying, well, America's going to say, well, you take care of Iran and we'll help you.
Okay, but in the meantime, the clock is ticking. Something has to be done, and I think, to your point, Israel is probably drawing the line in the sand much more clear than the United States has, and they will act, and it looks like that clock is ticking. Do you think that that action would include a regime change?
Well, the objective of an attack would be both. Obviously, to get rid of the nuclear capabilities, get rid of their long-range ballistic missiles, but that's not enough. Iran is financing 600,000 terrorists worldwide. It's 15 times larger than ISIS or Al Qaeda ever was. So they have to dismantle their 600,000 terrorists. The world will not function properly with a terror organization of that magnitude. Right now, Israel's doing 90% of the fighting. You know, they have terrorists in Lebanon, Israel's fighting. Terrorists in Gaza, Israel's fighting. Terrorists in Yemen, Israel's fighting. Terrorists in Syria, Israel's fighting. Terrorists, the whole country is run by terrorists, and Israel's something's blowing up in Iran every day, mysteriously. So the irony is Iran has declared war on Christians, Jews, and Hindus, in other words, half the world, and Israel's doing 95% of the fighting. What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
So, in effect, Israel's saving Christians, Jews, and Hindus from the Iranian death cult.
Boy, that's so well said. So, in the meantime, Syria's popped up, and Turkey wants to get its hands on it. Israel has dismantled some of its military, and President Trump reaches out to this terrorist leader and says, we're going to take your tariffs off. What's going on with that picture?
Well, it's sort of akin to what we described and discussed with Qatar. So Turkey is a frenemy. Syria used to be an enemy, and now I would put them in the frenemy category. In other words, both friend and enemy simultaneously. And President Trump is guessing and hoping, and I don't blame him, under the urging of Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, who he respects a lot, and Erdogan, who he respects but doesn't deserve the respect. But anyways, they're both encouraging him to embrace Syria, new government. And again, as we discussed with Qatar, he's probably saying, I'd rather have them in our tent than outside of our tent. If they're in our tent, maybe we can make them more of a friend and less of an enemy over time. We can, and the State Department did give Giuliani 7 or 8 suggestions. I saw them on the internet, which they should have given to Qatar, as we just discussed. And so I think it's a good gamble, what they're doing, and trying to move Turkey and Qatar and Syria, new government, to become more friends and less enemies. So I think they know this with their eyes wide open.
Okay. One other quick question before I run out of time. We see now that the president's used tariffs as an amazing negotiation tool. There's always the argument whether they work or don't work, but boy, they sure brought a lot of people to the table. And the other thing that it's done, it looks like it may have China on its knees economically. Where do you think this is going to end up?
Yes. Remember, Trump publicly says, we have the strongest military ever, but I don't like to use it. I don't like blowing things up. People get killed. And there's a lot of ramifications. I'm a negotiator. I bring people together, not with military means, but with persuasion. So tariffs, I call economic warfare. And it's a means of getting someone's attentions, like hitting China or someone with a 2x4 and say, now that I have your attention, let's negotiate. And so I think that's a good policy on President Trump's part, because if you don't want to use military means, and I don't blame him for that feeling, economic warfare is much preferred. And now we have China's attention. And remember, President Trump is going to be president for 4 years, another 3.5. But midterms are coming up in 1.5 years, and you never know what happens in midterms. So I have an expression that President Trump's trying to be a 4-year president or even an 8-year president in 1.5 years. So he has to get people's attention like right away before the time runs out.
You think it'll work with China?
Yes, because China has built an economy to serve America, basically, with low-cost products. Now, for 20 years, Americans said, well, great, thank you very much for selling me something for $1, and I only have to pay 50 cents. We didn't say that, but by consumer activity, we in effect said, thank you, China. And then President shows up and says, you're ripping us off by manufacturing it in China, and our workers are not producing it. Well, we can have our workers produce it, and then it'll be $1 again instead of 50 cents again. And so President Trump changed the rules. He was tired of having a $300 billion trade deficit with China, and he wants to fix it and fix it fast. And I think he has a good strategy for that.
All right, I got about 10 seconds. Tough question. Where do you think this leaves Russia these days?
Well, again, he's leaving Russia out of the cold, in the cold tundra, so to speak. He wants them to join the West, and President Putin is resisting that. So I think he's just going to have to continue the war for another year or two till President Putin comes to his senses.
Okay. Hey, thank you for your time. Good to see you again. Let me say to our viewers and listeners,
to be with you.
Check out his website, savethewest.com, and there is the picture of the landing page, and check out his book, The Multifront War. And boy, he covers everything in that book. You're fascinating, and I value your time. Look forward to having you back.
Anytime you want. Great to be with you.
See ya.